right, welcome back. We are here for episode 6, and today we are talking about how to set yourself up for dieting success. So we had some quite good feedback off the comp prep episode last week. So kind of running with that momentum, I guess, and now going to speak about like what sorts of things should you consider like before you're going into a diet, both for like Gen Pop. When we say Gen Pop as well, we're talking general population. I did think that last week when we said it a lot.
Yeah.
And also things to consider like before going into a comp prep. So we're going to try and cover everyone. But before we get into the nitty gritty, Bec, how's things? How's your last week been? What's been going on?
Yeah, I'm good. This week has been much better than the last few that I've had. As you guys know, I was pretty sick for a few weeks there. But back in the Gold Coast now, back to my normal routine. I don't have much travel coming up over the next few weeks, which is nice. Like, I absolutely love the ability I have to travel and the fact that with the comps and my work, I do get to travel everywhere. But I think I forget that no matter what, it is actually draining on your energy and like you are exposed to like so much germs and stuff on planes and
Yeah, true.
it's probably not the best thing for you to be traveling like every weekend for a period of time. So yeah, it feels really good to just be back home. The weather has been amazing. So being out in the sunshine, like got out in nature over the weekend, went for like a nice hike and just feel really like grounded after having done all that. So yeah, it's been an amazing week really. How's your week been?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's really cool. I know that we had this chat when you got back from Europe in terms of like, it's pretty sick just like loving normal life. Like I feel like when people go out like and go traveling and stuff, they're always like, oh, I don't want to go home.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like and I'm the same now as well, like is the opposite. It's like, oh, I can't wait to like get back to life.
Yeah, I always just look forward to coming back home. Like, it's so beautiful to love your everyday life.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that's that's the dream, right? Is to just wake up on like a Wednesday and be like, today's cool. Today's fun. We get to do good things and we live in a really pretty place. But
yeah, build a life that you don't need a holiday from.
Yeah, 100%. Well, this year I actually haven't had like a proper holiday. And I kind of just was like resigned to that fact because I was like, yeah, I'm moving to the Gold Coast. I'm going on a permanent holiday. Like I don't really need one, but I probably do coming up. But my week has been hectic even for me. Like I flew in and out of Sydney yesterday for my corporate job, which was really, really cool because I don't really get to see a lot of people like face to face in that part of my life, mainly work from home. So it's good just for like networking and stuff. I did a big presentation, which went really well. I've been staying with my parents as well. So they have come up from Melbourne. So they're staying in Coolangatta. So I just went and like stayed, pretty much like crashed their holiday for the week. But that's been really good just to like spend some time with them, although maybe not as much time as I would have liked just because I have been working a lot. But we've got some time kind of like dedicated on the weekend and then I'm going back to Melbourne with them next week. So yeah, the opposite of you at the moment. I'm moving around way too much, but no, things are good. So let's kick it off by talking about like what are some of the key things that you think people need to kind of like have in order before they enter into a dieting phase.
Well, I think the number one thing that applies in both pre-comp and also pre any sort of dieting phase, even if your goal is not to compete, it's just to lose some fat for everyday life. It's so important that you're going in from a place where you're in a healthy mindset, but also a healthy physical position to diet. So this means like making sure your relationship with food is in a good place, but also making sure your metabolism is in a good place, which basically means that, you know, you've been eating a decent amount of calories for an extended period of time before you start trying to diet. I think the number one problem a lot of people will face when they enter a dieting phase is that, you know, a lot of women tend to only eat around like 1,800 calories, if that, on a day-to-day basis. and then they're like, I want to diet. Well, where do you go from
Yeah,
there?
it's nothing to
Like,
take away from.
yeah, you're already not eating a whole lot. So if you're going to then try and go into a deficit by, say, 500 calories, you're already down at like the bottom of the barrel. Like if you go straight to 1,300 calories, like that's so low.
You're
like
going to be miserable. Yeah.
yeah. And then what happens when you stop responding? You're going to have to go lower than that again, or you're going to have to add more output via cardio, steps, etc. So I think a lot of people forget that if their goal is to lose fat, they can't necessarily just drop calories if their calories are already low. Like maybe what they need to do is actually like eat at around their maintenance level calories and focus on building some muscle, which in turn is then going to boost their metabolism and help them to lose body fat that way. And we kind of call that like recomposition, where you will eat a decent amount of calories, weight train, and therefore like change your aesthetic with less of a focus on like dropping calories and losing fat, but it's kind of like losing fat and building muscle at the same time. So yeah, I feel like that's the number one problem a lot of people face is they just want to start dieting straight away. So that, okay, I'm going to eat less.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to eat less. And
Yeah.
that's just like where they go immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like everyone wants the 8-week challenge, right? So it's like, okay, cool. I've decided I'm going to enter a fat loss phase. I want to do it right now. And it's like, if you actually want the most out of the fat loss phase, you've got to almost put in, you know, the pre-fat loss phase is almost, if not more important than the diet itself. But it's the work that like no one wants to do, because it's not as, dieting isn't fun, but it's like rewarding because you see the results, like they're quite tangible.
Yes.
You can see the scale going down, you can feel leaner, you know, that kind of 2, 3, up to 6 months, depending on who you are, like before the diet is not as rewarding because it's slower. You know, you're not seeing these quick results. The mirror's not changing a heap, but it is probably the best thing you can do to make that actual dieting phase, firstly, a lot more enjoyable. So you're not just like miserable, as you said, on like 1,300 calories, but it's going to set you up, you know, to be able to sustain that as well. Because you probably won't end at, you know, 1,200 calories. You might be able to end on 1,500, 1,600, which is a lot easier to kind of bounce back from and start to rebuild from than that really, really like low number. So I think it's taking that like long-term view, right? It's like getting out of this 8-week challenge mindset and start thinking in months and years when we're talking about like body changes or like body recomposition rather than very, very short term.
Yeah, I think anytime you want to achieve any sort of result with your body, the longer term your focus can be, the more successful your result is going to be and the more likely you are to sustain it. Like anytime you're looking for a quick fix, that's all it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be quick and then you're probably going to go straight back to square one. And like you said, it's not as glamorous doing that like work before the dieting phase, but it is very necessary. And it doesn't mean that no one can just start a dieting phase straight off the bat, because some people can. Some people are in a good position to do so. And I suppose like that's the benefit of getting a coach who's experienced and has expertise in the area, because they can assess your current position, what you've been doing in terms of your eating and your training, and like, are you actually in a good place to go into a dieting phase? Or is it actually something else that you need to get your results that you want with your body? Because another thing, I think a lot of the time women think, oh, to get the result I want with my body, I need to diet. Whereas a lot of the time, women will send me, say, a photo of someone that they want to look like. And I'm like, well, you can't actually look like that unless you eat more food and train hard. Like, this person didn't get this way by eating 1,200 calories a day. Like, that's not the answer. So sometimes what you need to achieve your goal isn't always a dieting phase.
Yeah, I think it's just the first thing that people think of. But they think they want weight loss when really they want like physique change.
Yeah.
And the two don't have to be the same. They're often not. Like as you said, it's often what people think is getting leaner is actually building muscle, because it's like how lean you are is really just a ratio between like how much muscle you have and how much fat you have. So it's like when people talk about like body fat percentage, you know, people get like the DEXA scans and like whatever. People forget the muscle part of that equation. So they think like, okay, if I'm at a certain level of body fat percentage, then in order to lose that or to drop that number, I need to lose body fat. Well, actually, you can change that percentage number by adding muscle to the equation. And so that's actually an easier, maybe not easier, a more enjoyable way to do it. Like if you have, say, like a 50 kilogram female, you add a substantial amount of muscle to that frame. Not only can she eat more, but she looks better, and she's probably pushed her calories up. So it's like being aware of like, well, what is actually your goal? Is fat loss something that you even need to do right now? I would say like for most females, maybe it's different in the comp prep world, but like most females could do with a build before they could do with a cut.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree with that. I think most women could do with more muscle mass on their frame, especially, outside of comp prep industry. Like if we're just looking at general females wanting to change their body for life, most women could benefit from that. And yeah, like you said, the more muscle you have on your body, the leaner you look with more body fat. So it's actually less about the number of your body fat percentage. And at the end of the day, no one cares about your body fat percentage. You don't walk around with that number on your forehead.
I wouldn't even know what mine is.
I don't know what mine is either. People always ask me that, especially in the context of comp prep. And I'm like, I don't care. Even in comp prep, I don't care what my body fat percentage is.
Because it makes no difference. The judges don't have it.
Judges don't know my body fat percentage. So why does it matter? All that matters is like the look that I'm going for, right? And I think in everyday life, same. Like the scale weight doesn't matter. The body fat percentage doesn't matter because no one knows it except for you. So at the end of the day, what you're going for is an aesthetic. So you've got to kind of get away from the idea that you just need to be less of those numbers.
Yeah. I think we're moving further away from it in terms of like, you know, the scale. I think it's better than it was, but still not maybe where it needs to be. But like I think about myself, and I have been, you know, I've been a very different, say 64, 65 kilos to another 64, 65 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, two very different bodies over the span of say like 3 or 4 years. And, you know, you see the before and after on Instagram all the time, right? Of like the same weight. And I don't think we can kind of shout that message loud enough that the number really doesn't mean anything. I don't know what anybody else weighs. Like we don't kind of walk around with it, you know, a sign on our head. You're the only person that knows that. But I have dealt with a lot of females who, have this number kind of like in their head, like I'll be happy when I hit X.
Mm.
And sometimes I think you almost have to hit it to realize that it's not what you thought it was. But the number doesn't kind of like mean anything. So it's like you trying to work out, all right, do you want to weigh down at 60 kilos or do you want to like look and feel a certain way? And it's actually option number B. That doesn't work. Letter B. And making sure that you like differentiate like weight loss with like physique change.
Yeah, totally. And regarding that message of not being too attached to numbers, I share this story a fair bit and I think it's like really helpful for women. But where I've felt most confident in my body on the scale has shifted so much over the last like 8 years. I remember days where I was like, I can't get more than 51 kilos because that's where I like look my best.
Too, yeah.
And then it was like, can't get more than 54 because that's where I look my best. And I was like, can't get more than 57, can't get above 60. And now I'm like, I look my best around 62. Like literally over 10 kilos more than where I first thought I looked my best because I've added muscle to my frame. So if you're getting caught up in like, oh, I need to diet down to this scale number, like you're literally holding yourself back from looking your best because guarantee I look way better now than I did at 51 kilos.
Yeah. And weight looks different on everyone. I think like when you and I met, I mean, we didn't go straight into how much do you weigh, chat? But like,
that would be very problematic.
Yeah. But like, I think we kind of hover around the same and like you'd be almost a foot taller than me like a fairly amount, like, and we look quite different. But like, I don't think you would say, you know, that we maybe look like we weigh the same. I don't know who looks, you know, higher or lower, but it's like it looks different on every single body.
Yeah, and we're both fit. We're both healthy, body fat percentage. Like, yeah, it can be surprising what someone's weight is like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think about, say, like myself and my sister, she'd be almost like probably 10 kilos lighter than I am. But our body size in terms of like maybe like diameter and stuff is like relatively the same. And it's just the power of adding muscle to your frame.
Yeah.
Like, you don't necessarily have to, that, you know, the whole, if I start lifting weights, I'm going to get bulky. Like, I think that messaging is getting better, but it's still a fear that people have. I've had, you know, clients be like, oh, I don't want to train arms. I'm like, I've been doing bicep curls for like 10 years and I don't think I've got like guns kind of thing. But just like starting to be okay with like adding muscle to your frame is actually probably going to give you the body that you're after rather than being like afraid of it.
Yeah, and one of the biggest benefits to adding muscle to your frame as well is it does increase your metabolism.
Yeah.
So metabolism is essentially like the way we're going to burn through calories, right? The higher your metabolism, the more calories you're going to burn. And to increase that at rest as well. So if you're sitting there and you hold more muscle on your frame and you're not doing anything, you're just sitting there with more muscle, you're going to be burning more calories than someone with less muscle because it requires more energy to stay on your body, basically, to put it very simply. So that's the benefit of making sure you do focus on actually building muscle because you're setting yourself up to be able to eat more food and for it to, I guess, like go somewhere productive, which is to keeping your muscles on your body rather than just converting to body fat. So that's why that's really beneficial. And I think like that probably leads into the conversation we need to have around like your metabolism upregulating when you eat more food and then downregulating when you diet. And something I touched on at the start of this episode was it's really important, especially let's say in a pre-comp kind of phase, it's really important to make sure that you're spending time eating a high amount of calories before you start a dieting phase, especially in comp prep because you're going to be getting down to very lean levels of body fat because that allows your metabolism to upregulate to a place where you're burning heaps of calories, like you're able to then diet on a higher number, basically, because you've taught your metabolism to get used to more food and to use that productively. So, for example, like in a comp prep context, I will not start a girl dieting for a comp unless she's eating like 2,400 to 3,500 calories a day. So this is above 3,000 calories for a lot of my clients before we start a comp prep dieting phase. It's relative to height and size. So say I've got a girl who's just over 5 foot tall.
Yeah.
Well, 2,400 is probably a good amount for her to start from because she's a lot smaller. But yeah, I want my clients anywhere up to like 3,500, 4,000, even if they can handle it. The more food that they can be eating and holding like a decent condition, the better before they start dieting, because otherwise you just don't have as much room to move and you're going to have to get lower and lower in calories in order to achieve the result that you want. And this is like I guess it's a more drastic change. Like you really want to push them up for a comp prep. But I think the principle still applies in like general fat loss for everyday life. Like you still do want to spend time on higher calories to set yourself up for a successful dieting phase.
Yeah. I think you touched on it at the start of the episode, like this common 1,800 calorie female kind of diet, right? Like how many girls are just living in that like low calorie end and have just gotten used to it. And so in their minds, they're like, well, I'm not losing weight, you know, down at 1,800. Like this must be my maintenance. But what has actually happened is like you've spent so long at 1,800 calories that your body has now downregulated how much energy it's burning. So yeah, currently your maintenance is 1,800 because like your body is always trying to protect you. Your body's job is to help you to survive, not to help you look good in a bikini. And so if you have been eating 1,700 calories for, the past year, 2 years or whatever, your body can't allow that to stay as a deficit because you'll just lose weight until you die. So it's like it actually has to then, down regulate all of the little processes in your day-to-day life that burn energy. So like speaking, like getting up and picking things up from, the other side of the room. All of these sorts of things, you won't even notice that it's happening, but you will just start burning less energy. So because you're only getting so much in. And so it's like, yeah, you might be at maintenance there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your maintenance could be. It's just that you're now used to it. So it's like adding calories. I know like girls get really scared, right? When it's like 2,000 seems to be some like scary number to women.
To go above.
Yeah. They think that it's like you add 1 calorie over 2,000 and they just like explode. But what you're actually doing is like teaching yourself how to have that as your new maintenance. I think that's where there's like a common misconception is that you're trying to like put them into a surplus or whatever. It's like, no, what you're trying to do is like just add a little bit of fuel to the fire and then the fire has more energy to burn and just like push it up. Like how many times do you start adding calories to a girl's diet and she's like, oh my God, I'm losing weight. Is this magic? And you're like, no, I'm not a wizard. Like I just understand kind of how this all works.
No, I am a wizard.
Yeah.
No, that was really well articulated. And I think that is one of the biggest problems and misconceptions is that people think their maintenance calories is static. So they think, okay, I'm currently eating 1,700 calories and I'm maintaining. So that's maintenance. But like you said, maintenance can be shifted. We just have to trick that metabolism because your metabolism is designed to be adaptive. Like that is the whole point of it. People talk about, I guess, like damaged metabolisms. And I've seen a lot of conversation out there that there's no such thing as metabolic damage. And it's like, well, I would agree. There's not necessarily metabolic damage, but there is metabolic upregulation and downregulation.
Yeah, adaptation.
So we do need to consider that and use it to our advantage. So spending the time on higher calories to upregulate the metabolism so that then you can maintain on higher calories because that's what's freeing and that's going to enable you to live your life because, if you're eating 1,700 calories a day every day and then you want to go to Europe and you want to eat pizza and pasta every day because you're going to Italy and so you're eating then maybe closer to 3,000 calories a day, well, your body's used to 1,700. So, of course, then you're going to have the consequence that your body's not going to know how to burn through that. And, you probably will gain some body fat.
Yeah.
It will be a surplus for you because you haven't taught your body how to eat more food. Whereas if you'd reverse dieted up to 2,500 and therefore upregulated your metabolism before you went, you're probably going to go eat all the pizza and pasta and come back pretty much exactly the same. So it's a thing that we can trick and use to our advantage. And that's where I think as well reverse dieting comes into things. And reverse dieting is essentially the process of building the calories up slowly, like you kind of just touched on, in a way that can either sustain your fat loss result or can even be used to lose weight. If you're trying to like get someone's metabolism to upregulate faster than the calorie increases, then you can use it to get someone to drop weight. And because their maintenance is increasing throughout that period, then they're actually dropping weight even though they're eating more food.
Yeah. I think people think that like dieting has to be filled with suffering. Like you've got to, it's all willpower and it's discipline. And it's like the best dieting phases are the ones that are the easiest. Like you don't get more points for it being hard. So it's like if you can do things before you enter that phase, that means that you don't have to, crawl through every day. Like you need energy to live. And so what happens as well, like just on the topic of like building calories up is like when you take someone from 1,800 and you build them up to 2,500, they often are like, oh my God, I feel amazing because they just got used to feeling like shit. It's like just because you can do something, just because you can live on 1,800 and not fall in a heap doesn't mean that life couldn't be 30% better where like you don't struggle to get out of bed in the morning. You're not dragging yourself through the last set at the gym. You're not sore for 3 days after you train because you're actually like recovering. Like all of these sorts of things, if you do them for long enough, they become your normal. Like things ache and I'm tired and like that's not the way that it's meant to be. And often it's just you're just not eating enough, especially like protein and stuff. I think especially for people that are super disciplined and you kind of know that like you do have that extra lever to pull or that you can push through, it doesn't necessarily, it's like why push if you don't have to push?
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, even in the context of comp prep, it shouldn't be suffering for 20 weeks. Like, generally, I'll find maybe the last 6 to 8 weeks of comp prep's like a grind, but it shouldn't be so hard the whole time. Like, yeah, it's hard in a way that you have to like flex your willpower muscle and say no to the extra chocolate in the cupboard when you're a little bit hungry when you start. But it should only be like a real grind that lasts like end little period if you've done what you need to do to set yourself up for that successful dieting phase.
Yeah. Just coming back to, I guess, like some of the things that we maybe need to tick off or consider before someone enters into a fat loss phase, right? I think a big one is asking yourself why you're doing it, like the intention behind a fat loss phase or like entering into a dieting phase, because I think that can really like affect its success. Like if you're entering into it out of a place of like body hatred or like punishment, which a lot of females do, like they're trying to, feel better in that regard. It's very difficult to kind of make it a success because it only takes like one off track day to go into that kind of like self-shame spiral. I think that's where that like pre-dieting phase can actually help like mindset stuff as well, because it's easier to do that work from a place of like, all right, I'm going to do all of this from a place of I'm looking after myself. So I'm going to spend the time to build up my calories and then I'm going to diet still from a place of trying to look after myself. I'm just like kind of doing it for me. They're two very different intentions behind like the one phase. And I think it's just a really important question to ask, like, why you're doing this.
Yeah. And then if you've done that mindset work and like set yourself up well, you're probably doing it more as like a challenge.
Yeah.
Which is an exciting thing, right? Like we love being challenged in all areas of our life. So I think that is a much healthier way to kind of approach it. I think as well on the what do you need to do to set yourself up for a successful diet, like I mentioned at the very start, relationship with food and making sure that's in a good place, which I honestly think spending time eating at higher calories is one of the most healing things you can do for your relationship with food, particularly tracking at maintenance or in a surplus. Because when you do that, you're allowing your body to be satiated like for a long period of time, where we eliminate a lot of these like really strong like food cravings or overeating episodes, binging, things like that, where a lot of those things are triggered by restriction. So I think if you spend the time eating higher calories, you become less food focused. So when you're actually satiated for the first time in your life for a lot of women, because women do so often just spend their lives on 1,800 calories, you just stop thinking about chocolate every night and things like that a lot of the time. Like, yeah, sometimes we still want it, but it's not like your whole being just can't stop thinking about it. So I think having that higher calorie phase before you start dieting is so important to set yourself up for success in terms of being able to then move into something more restrictive again, where you are like in a deliberate calorie deficit, where hunger and cravings are going to come up because you've kind of taught yourself that less food focused kind of way of being.
Yeah. I think those food thoughts, like as you were saying, where it's like almost every second of the day, you're just kind of like thinking about food. From a lot of conversations that I've had with women who are like that. And I know I have been like that at periods too. And you think like that it's just like, oh, I should be able to control my thoughts, right? Like I'm running the show up here. But they often go away when you start to eat more, because it's coming back to this, like your body is trying to look after you. your body's making you think or like crave food because it needs food. Like it's not kind of rocket science. But I think they think that it's like, oh, I'm just food obsessed. You know, like I'm always going to be that way. And then it's like, okay, when they give you enough trust to be like, we're just going to try and eat more for a little bit. Like it's going to be okay. It's a real fear for some people, like genuine fear. And I want to validate that it can be a very scary experience. But when you do it in a controlled manner with someone guiding you, which often helps, and then it's like little by little they start kind of being like, oh, I didn't think about food, for this afternoon. It's like, yeah, because your brain now has capacity to think about other things because you're giving yourself enough of what you need to like open up, other thoughts. It doesn't always have to be like that. And eating more, your brain and body are connected. It can definitely help.
Yeah. And I want to preface as well that doing it for 4 weeks is not
No.
going to help.
None. Yeah.
This is like you need to commit a period of time to eating higher calories. And yeah, there's a massive fear around that. And eating higher calories doesn't mean you're going to be putting on exponential body fat during that time. Like, yes, your scale weight might go up because you've got to remember if you eat more food, you've got more glycogen in your muscles, which is like the storage component of carbohydrate. It will store in your muscles. So you've got more of that. Anytime we're storing more carbs in our muscles, we're also storing more water in there as well. You're going to have more food literally sitting in your digestive system because you're eating more food. And you're going to probably be building muscle if you're weight training as well. So that's going to add weight to the scale too. So I think it's such a hard one because when women start eating more food, the scale weight probably will go up, but it's not body fat. And like weight and fat is not the same thing. And that's where like you really need to kind of lean into that discomfort a little bit and really trust your coach and trust the process. And this is something that I do so much of. Like we're quite well known for like reverse dieting and teaching women to eat more food and achieve their goals. So this is like my absolute bread and butter with clients. And, you're not the only person that's scared of this process. Like so many people, 80% of women are scared. There's not many that come to me and they're like, I can't wait to eat more food. And there's not many that aren't scared and triggered by seeing a scale weight go up a little bit. But you just really have to trust the process and know that it's going to set you up for such a better life and so much more enjoyment of your life. And also then when you are wanting to enter a dieting phase, it's going to set you up for more success in that also.
Yeah, for sure. I think something I said a lot is like data is only useful if you're going to do something with it as well. So it's like for some women, if you are kind of going into that like, all right, I'm going to put in some time to build up my calories slowly, you might have a plan to do so in a controlled manner. If seeing the scale go up is really triggering, it might just be time to take a break from it. Like, it's more triggering for some people than it is for others. It's very individual. It used to be more triggering for me. Nowadays, not really. It's just a data point. But if you are committed to like the reverse diet, right, and you see the scale going up, you're really not going to do much with that data most of the time. Like if this is the plan and I'm going to stick to the plan, you don't need that data point anymore. Like until you maybe do want to go into like a fat loss phase, or maybe like halfway through you just want to kind of have a little check. So you might like weigh yourself for a week, get an average, and then kind of like move on. Like if it's really kind of playing on your mind, that it is going up, you don't need data if it's not going to affect the plan.
Yeah, I agree. And there's definitely clients where I'll say, hey, I think we should stop weighing you because it's not helping. Like it's just making you want to go backwards. It's making you want to like go back to that comfort zone where you don't eat much and just stay there. But at the end of the day, like what you're doing hasn't been working, right? So we've got to make a change. So yeah, removing things like that, if it is causing just way too much fear and discomfort, like I'm 100% on board with that.
Yeah, I think it's I said it a lot too, being like, your way is not working. That's why we're here, right? But it's still like they don't want to let go of it.
Yeah.
Like humans have this kind of like loss aversion, right? Where it's like, even if you're not 100% happy like with what you have, we still we fear going backwards more than we kind of are driven to move forwards. So it's like even someone who might not be happy with their current body or current lifestyle or anything like that are still resistant to change because they think, oh, I'm not 100% here, but what if I get worse? And we're way more afraid of that than we are kind of like motivated to move forwards. They say like, you know, you're more afraid of losing $10 than like wanting to gain 20.
Yeah.
But you have to realize that like in order to get something different, you have to do something different.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have been in this, you know, restrict and then fall off and then restrict and then fall off cycle for as long as you can remember, you are going to have to probably do something which feels drastic, which might be like not weighing yourself, which might be like maybe taking a break from tracking or tracking in a surplus or whatever it is. It's got to be different to what you're doing now, because if you continue to do what you're doing now, you're going to keep getting what you're getting now. But it's like validating that fear that, yeah, it's scary. Any change is scary because you don't know what's going to be. You already know what you've got now. If you are 100% sure that what you've got now is not what you want in the future, you kind of have to just like leap into the darkness or light, let's call it, not knowing like where you're going to land, but knowing that it's going to be somewhere different than where you are right now.
Yeah. I think on that, I want to share like a little story about a client that I've worked with over about like the last 12 months who came to me exactly like that. And I remember we had like our first consult call, and it took her like another probably 6 months before she kind of called back and was like, okay, like let's go. Because I think the idea of changing her habits was just so scary for her, because she was like, I'm just too concerned I'm going to gain body fat, etc. And so for some context, like this girl was doing like 20 plus K steps a day, doing HIIT classes like 6 days a week, not getting a period, eating absolutely nothing, like very, very low calories, like wouldn't touch carbs, like that sort of typical pattern that we see in terms of extreme restriction. And obviously she wasn't healthy, and you know, she said, I have no energy. Like, I know that I'm like doing too much, but I just can't stop. Like, this is the only way that I feel like I can
It's a literal addiction.
Yeah. She's like, it's the only way I feel like I can stay lean. And I kind of explained the process of tapering off output, investing more energy in weight training rather than HIIT training, where you're actually going to build muscle, build that metabolism up like we spoke about earlier. And I explained to her the process of reverse dieting and slowly building your calories up, and how that can enable you to actually like maintain good condition while eating more food, and how that's going to help her in terms of her relationship with food. This girl was also binging a lot as well, and she really wanted to like break that cycle. And I kind of explained, you can't break that cycle when you're still restricting. Like, you've got to get out of that place. But she was very scared, and like I said, took her another 6 months before she decided to actually start working with me. And now I've worked with her for 12 months. We built her calories up to, I think we got to about 2,700 calories. She didn't weigh herself during that time because we knew it was going to be too triggering for her. But she has like, she expresses so much gratitude constantly, because she is like, oh my God, I wish I started this sooner. Like, this has completely changed my life. Like, she doesn't binge anymore. Like, yeah, sometimes she'll eat more because she's genuinely hungry, but that's like normal human overeating, not like binge episodes. She feels completely free to be able to eat out socially. She's not scared of doing that anymore. She doesn't do excessive steps. She hardly does cardio. She only does it for enjoyment, just does weight training. And like, now we're entering our first like dieting phase together now that she's done that work. And we've been in a dieting phase for maybe 6 to 8 weeks now, binge free during the dieting phase. Like, she did that work to set herself up for success, and it's like completely changed her life and her relationship with food. But she was so scared that she couldn't even do it for the first 6 months. Like, she had to think about it for another 6 months, which happens a lot, I think, because that fear is just so strong for so many people.
Yeah, if it's a repeated pattern and of behavior and thoughts and stuff, like you get up and do the same thing every day for years, anything apart from that is going to feel terrifying because you don't know what to expect. Whereas it's like, even in a situation where like what you're doing now, like she said she was tired and exhausted and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, but she can navigate that because she knows what's coming. And so it's like, it is going to feel comfortable. And I bet you what happened in that 6 months is like things often have to get bad enough to move. And not bad as in like nothing catastrophic has to happen, but you have to hit a point where it's like, okay, this is really affecting my life now. And you get to decide, I guess, like at what point it's affecting you enough to make a change. That will be different for everyone. So it's like she maybe started to identify that it was affecting her life, but then it was too scary. And that's the thing. You can't get people, I often say, like, we can't get people that first 10% of like, I want to make a change.
Yeah.
I'm not here. Like, we're not convincing people that you have to. It's like they've got to get themselves the first 10, being like, I'm ready. And then you can kind of take them the rest. But it's like once it really starts to affect your life, and maybe people listening to this, if it is that relationship with food, it's a very, very common thing, especially amongst women. And I feel like it's maybe one of those things that the more I see it, the more I see it. Where it's this like constant obsession about food. Yeah, the over output, the addiction to like routine, and I have to kind of keep doing this. But at a certain point, there will be a tipping point where you go, I can't keep living like this. And hopefully with this messaging, that point comes sooner rather than later, before you kind of are okay with the unknown and making a change rather than like continuing doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think some big like red flags to look out for if you're in that space is like, you know, binge eating. Like if you are struggling like to control your relationship with food and your food choices, like you probably don't have a very good relationship with food and are restricting too much. Like if your energy is down, if your health markers are down, like if you're not getting your period, if you're experiencing hair loss or like poor skin or poor digestive function, any of these, like poor energy, insomnia, like any of these markers, like you're probably not in a healthy place and you do really need to like make that change. And it's okay if it takes some time to get there and make the decision to make the change, but like look out for these red flags in yourself, because I think people need to know that's actually not how you're meant to feel.
Yeah. We've kind of touched on like the building your calories up, you know, before the dieting phase. That's really important. I think as like a side note to that, which is kind of on the same thought pattern, is just like having a period of consistency before you do the diet. And this is probably specific to those who are in that kind of like up down of both training and eating. I think you'd see like a lot of females being like, I'm eating 1,200 calories and I'm not like losing weight. But what's really happening is like they do like 1,200, 1,200, 1,200, 5,000, 1,200, 1,200. Like it's up and down. And so it's introducing that kind of like period of a consistent intake to like help manage, like hunger, the cravings, like the binge episodes and that kind of thing. Because what happens is like they think they're eating 1,200 calories, but that's not accurate, because it's like we're working like over an average. So it's like as you start to introduce like more consistency as well, you start to get a more like accurate representation of your starting like caloric intake, whether or not you're tracking or not. A lot of girls that I am doing nutrition stuff with, it's often the healing the relationship with food, and most of them aren't tracking. It's just like, all right, we're going to introduce like a structure to what you're eating. So because if you take every guardrail away, they feel like their head's spinning and like, oh my God, there's too much choice. So it might even be like, all right, just follow a period of like 3 meals, like 2 snacks, you know, hit a protein target. And it's like just ticking those goals off. You can start to introduce more food just with that kind of structure, and introduce little bits of flexibility, like, just like have it, maybe a chocolate bar is like your afternoon snack or something, starting to get rid of like all of those food fears. But that will kind of help you enter a diet phase as well, rather than this like up, down kind of like seesaw. It allows your body to relax a little bit too, because it's like to go restrict, you know, a lot of food restrict. It's mindset effects, it's body effects. It's like if you can just put in a solid like, I'd probably say 3 to 6 months of just like a consistent intake, maybe building up as you go, and also consistent training. It's like you're just going to feel probably more peaceful as well as you go like into the diet.
Yeah, you also just need a baseline to adjust things from. Like, there's so many women out there, I think, that'll eat like that one day, 3 meals and 2 snacks. And then the next day they just don't eat until dinner time, just have one meal. And it's like that, like, roller coaster of
Yeah.
calorie intake. Like, we don't know, like, where your maintenance is.
Yeah,
yet.
it's very hard. It's like throwing a dart.
Yeah, and the best way to figure out maintenance is actually in practice. Like, you can use online calculators, but that's just a guess.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and because maintenance is dynamic, like we spoke about before, the best way to find like your current true maintenance is to eat the same amount of calories every day, whether it's tracked or whether it's just in a basic meal plan kind of structure, and see, do you maintain or do you gain or do you lose? Like what kind of happens? And I don't mean in the first week, because you might gain in the first week because you're filling up muscle glycogen, etc.
Yep.
It's more about like over a period of time. So like 4 weeks on the same intake, like what happens? It's going to go up and down with your period, things like that. But at the end of the day, if we have like a decent time period where we can assess like how is your body truly responding to these calories, then we can make a change from there, whether it's we go up, whether we go down. At least then we have a baseline to then work from.
Yeah. And maybe just even touching on, I guess, like that first calorie drop, like the first kind of like step into the diet, right? Like we've spoken about the phase before the diet and all the things that you kind of need to consider. That first like calorie drop, everyone wants to go straight down to 1200, right? It's quicker. It's not actually quicker, but they think it's quicker. Trying to get like the minimal effective dose is what you want to do to start off with. It's like, yeah, you might see a more rapid drop if you go to 1200, but you will stop responding at some point, and then what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, don't jack up your steps and your cardio and like drop your calories down in the first go. It's like you want to remove as fewer calories as possible to see a result.
Yeah.
And then don't touch it until you have stopped responding for like 3-4 weeks, I'd say. Females, I feel like you need to give them a longer period of time, because it's like it's a bit harder to measure whether or not they've actually stopped responding or if our hormones are just doing all the fun things that they do. But yeah, don't touch it. It's like if you can continue to keep seeing results on 1800 for 3 months, why are we going to 1600? Like, just stay there and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, like don't fix what's not broken.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. Everyone's like, they want to start dieting. They want to go to 1200 calories. They're going to start training twice a day. Like, don't throw everything at it from the get-go. Like, make it gradual.
Yeah.
And slowly decrease calories. And like Loz just said, like, you don't need to keep dropping calories if it's working. And you do need to
enjoy the food.
Yeah. If it's working, stay there, because there's 2 different types of general metabolisms as well. There's really adaptive ones, which means you tend to downregulate really quickly and you probably do need to drop more. And then there's really non-adaptive metabolisms, which means the metabolism doesn't adapt that much, which means you can stay on the same calories and keep losing weight for like literally nearly 6 months. Like, and that's just a random ballpark time frame. Like, it could be longer. Honestly, like, you don't need to drop calories if things are still working. So just be patient. And I think sometimes people get in their head when they work with a coach as well that, oh, the coach should be making a change every week to be doing their job. It's like, no, your coach needs to be looking after your health, which a lot of the time means not making a change every week and like bringing you like back to ground and reminding you that we don't need to do that because things are working. And like you mentioned with women as well, like we have things like periods that get in the way where it'll make the scale go up and we'll feel fluidy and you know, we might not necessarily see the progress that week, but we can still like gauge whether or not someone's probably making progress relatively, right? So if someone usually goes up by like 1.5 kilos premenstrual and this week they're dieting and they went up by 500 grams, well, there was probably a loss in there, right?
Yeah.
Like you can kind of figure that out mathematically. So, you know, talking a client through that and saying, hey, like this is probably why the scale didn't actually reflect your progress this week, or maybe why you feel like your pants are a bit tighter this week even though you're dieting. Write it out. Just wait until your period's over. I don't like making decisions to drop calories or start dieting phases or anything like that when someone's on their period, because you're not making it from a good place, that decision.
data, it's like you've got to be able to compare it to its equivalent, right? It's
Mm.
like you, in someone's cycle, it's like you can't compare week 2 with week 4 of their cycle. It's like you got to kind of start measuring up week 2, week 3, and because otherwise it's not like a fair comparison. What you said on like the adaptive metabolism and the non-adaptive, I think that's how you termed it. I wanted to talk about the like having an adaptive metabolism can actually come from dieting too much. Like if you're like dieting really, really frequently, it's like you can start to become a little bit more like you start to adapt more. I know that like my first diet, and I don't know if this is the same for like comp prep, if this happens over like, the more comps and stuff that they do. But say like the first time I did a fat loss phase, I was nowhere near as adaptive as I am now. Like it was a lot more successful. Well, yeah, it was a lot more successful. I didn't have to go nearly as low. But I think like over time, and I don't diet like that frequently, but I think with every phase, it can get slightly more difficult. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know about that. What I would say is I think it's largely genetic. Like I think
Okay.
whether you're non-adaptive or adaptive, I think is largely genetic. I've always been very, very adaptive, which in an off season when I'm trying to eat more food is great because I can get my food really high
Yeah.
and stay pretty lean because my body just adapts.
Yeah.
But when I'm trying to diet, I've got to go low.
Yeah.
Like my body is just too smart.
Yeah.
It just figures it out. Do I think that you can become more adaptive the more you diet? Not necessarily, but I think that, for example, the more that you reverse diet your calories up, the higher you're probably going to get there. But I think it's more relative to like how your muscle mass and like body composition shifts over time. Like every reverse diet I've ever done, I've got my calories higher while maintaining a better look, like up to the point where I can get them to 3,000 calories. But I don't think that's because my metabolism changed in terms of its adaptivity. But I think my metabolism increased as a result of the fact I've built more muscle over that time and I've reverse dieted successfully. So I've done the work to, I suppose, teach my metabolism to increase more so than in the past. Like every successful reverse diet has helped to increase that number.
Yeah. I think there is a lot to be said though for the time spent out of dieting as well, just kind of along the lines of like the reverse dieting. But it's like not getting stuck in this like up, down. It's like maintenance is cool too.
Yeah. And I think the time spent out of dieting 100% is so important because I think that just overall comes back to that like metabolic up and down regulation rather than adaptation necessarily. But it's just like setting your metabolism up to like maintain at a higher rate before you then start dieting and set up your relationship with food to be in a good place too by having that time not dieting.
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes when we you see it a lot, it's like as soon as you hit a point, it's like, okay, I want to diet again. It's like, hang on, let's just chill out for a bit. People like the diet, as I said at the start, because it's rewarding, right?
Yeah.
It's like you get like getting leaner. We can't say it doesn't feel good. Like it does. That's why people do it.
Yeah, and I think like at least 6 months.
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah, people think timeout is like a month. You're like, no.
They're like, I did 8 weeks on higher calories. It's like, no, that's not enough for your metabolism to truly be like, okay, yeah, cool. This is my new set point.
Yeah, the reverse takes so much longer than the diet itself. Like muscle building is a time-consuming process, especially compared to fat loss. So it's like giving yourself that ample time, especially if you are trying to, like add size, maybe is the wrong word, or size, muscle to your frame. It's painfully slow sometimes. But you kind of have to, again, it's like committing to the process, like give it time. Don't be addicted to the constant, every few months, I'm going to go back into a deficit.
Yeah, and do that regardless of whether you want to compete or whether you're just an everyday person who wants to look their best and feel their best for everyday life, because it's on a different scale. Like I said earlier, like for competitors, you've got to really force your calories up as high as you can. You don't have to do that as drastically for like an everyday client, but it's still the same kind of process that you need to go through.
Yeah. It allows you as well, I think, like more capacity to put the foot down in the diet. Like if you're kind of half in a dieting mindset all the time, it's very hard to kind of like amp that up when you need to. But if you really, increase a lot more flexibility, like socializing and all that kind of stuff, it's easier to then go, all right, I'm going to nail focus for 3 months. Whereas if you haven't really been, switching off from the dieting phase, you don't really have, again, it's like, what do you take from? You haven't really like built up your stores. And also like the people around you are going to get sick of you dieting all the time.
Yeah, and if you're constantly feeling deprived, like
Yeah.
year round, because you're trying to restrict yourself in some way, like it does make it harder to actually achieve your goal because you're kind of like half in, half out all the time.
Yeah.
Because you'll be like, okay, I'm dieting. And then you're like, oh, screw it. I've been dieting forever. I'm going to go out on a bender.
Yeah.
And just like, come undone that way. Like people will, I don't know, cave and be like, I'm just going to eat a pizza. I'm just going to have the weekend off and just eat whatever I want because, like, screw it. I've been doing this for so long because you're trying to deprive yourself for so long. But if you just do it for a shorter period of time after doing that work beforehand, like, you just have stronger willpower in that setting.
Yeah. Like fat loss it's a phase, not like a way of life.
Yes, that is a very good way to sum it up.
Thanks, Star.
I feel like we've covered some really good content in this episode today. So did we want to leave with just some takeaways? Like what would you say the number one takeaway is you have for people from today?
I think, like kind of the point that I made before in terms of like just really checking in with yourself as to like why you want to do it. Because I've seen both sides and I just don't think that you can get a successful result when it's coming from a place of like trying to punish yourself or where it's not coming from that place of like self-challenge or wanting to look after yourself. I think it's a really important component because there's so many parts that come into a dieting phase, like turning up to the gym when like, maybe you didn't feel like it or, meal prepping your food or like saying no to maybe certain like social events or like whatever it is. That all needs to come from a place of I'm doing this for me, not I can't have those things. Like it's just a really important like definition to kind of like reflect on. What about you?
Yeah, I love that. I think I want to kind of steal your quote actually as the takeaway.
It's all yours.
And say, yeah, dieting is a phase. It's not a way of life. Like you literally have to spend the time out of a dieting phase and that's going to set you up for success, not just if you do decide to go into a dieting phase, but it's also going to allow you to build muscle. It's going to allow you to have so much more food freedom and heal your relationship with food at the same time. And honestly, like all the good things come from that phase, but it's such a scary thing. And I understand that because I was scared the first time I did it. And I was probably scared the first few times I did it, to be fair. And it took a lot of experience doing it for me to now understand its value and its importance, not just for myself, but for clients as well. So I think if you are really struggling with that fear, like the best thing you can do is get a coach and get support. And like, even though you're still going to experience that fear, at least then you have like that expert guidance to kind of, bring you back and remind you like why this is an important part of the process. And you can kind of trust that they like know what they're doing and you can be more confident in the process rather than just trying to do it alone and do it yourself. Because I think when something does really scare you, you're not going to stick to it if you're trying to do it yourself. So get some help. It's okay to ask for help. And, the coach just wants what's best for you and your health and your relationship with food and your results long term. Like they want all the same things that you want, which I think people get concerned about as well. Like they forget that the coach wants you to get results too. They're not just trying to make
it's
you
also
eat
in their
more
best interest
and
if
gain
you
weight.
100%.
So just remember that your coach wants you to get the best result too. So just trust the process and get some help if you're scared.
Yeah. Love it. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. If you guys like today's episode, please let us know if it's helping or going to help with your, upcoming fat loss phase or maybe into a reverse diet. We'd love to hear your stories or share with a friend. But that's up.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.